but at least once a month we will go like late night like this. So Darshan, just hang in there, man. Like we got this. What time do you have to wake up?
All I got out of this whole conversation so far. You know, they say that like billionaires have their own like WhatsApp group that they hang out in. That's the billionaires. These are the clinical research billionaires who have their own WhatsApp group and are hanging out.
Well, I wish. I mean, we're working towards that. You know, Monica, how's it going?
Yes, Monica. Buenas noches.
Co-founder of the CRC Academy, Latinos in Clinical Research, Save Our Sites. What else? The Circle, the Universe. I mean, we got so many things going on.
Like the Netflix TV show?
The Clinical Research Circle, yeah.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah, it's because it never ends, you know, just like these after darks. Then we've got Chris Sauber, everyone's favorite pragmatist. Give him a great idea and he'll shoot it down in like 2 seconds. Like five words.
I have a free drug that no one wants to do anything with. It'll make $1 billion. Shoot it down, Chris.
Yeah, shoot it down.
It's free. It can't be worth anything.
See, there you go. This is the kind of stuff we get, Chris. And then Justin Rudolph, who I've had him on the show twice. Our last one, the part 2, was such a good. That was a 1 of 10 on the rankings. People love that. People love Justin. Him and Robert, you know, they go way back. Currently, both working for the same company, doing consulting now. And of course, Darshan Kulkarni, who we just went live with earlier with the best camera of by far. I mean, wow, dude, it's not even fair. Look at that.
$42.
$42
for one trip to Anaheim.
Hey guys.
And last but not least, last will be Judy.
Yeah.
But right now it's Ashley Margot, SOS, Save Our Sites co-founder. Started as a CRA, works for a sponsor now. Works for a biotech. One of the most organized people I know.
Oh my
Takes
gosh.
notes in every meeting. Actually, you're not taking notes in this one?
No, not. You just like calling me out. It's 10 o'clock at night. Okay.
She'll take minute meetings of every meeting and email it to everyone afterwards.
And I sent you an email today about this exact topic, Ashley. You have yet to answer.
I haven't seen the email. Sorry.
Don't worry, I'm behind too. But we're going to start on a somber note because Robert Goldman, this was the topic. So he was watching Darshan and I live earlier, and he was talking about.
Oh, you were that guy.
I was that guy.
That guy.
I didn't say.
Bastion.
I didn't say anything. I was just watching. I was enjoying the content.
There's only one listener, one streamer, so that explains it.
So that was me.
That was Robert. So he was saying, you know what? I always say, currently at least, clinical research is booming, at least for the sites. It is. Mm-hmm. Robert says no. You know, this is why you see that it's booming, but it's not. Icon just laid off like 20% of the workforce.
No, it wasn't that much. It was like 20 people or something. I can look it up.
Oh, 20 people.
It was on Reddit.
That'd be like us letting go of like a part-time person.
Was it a specific department? Or
it was in the clinical research
art on the wall.
No, it was in operations for sure because I saw a bunch of posts about like CTMs losing their job. I don't know the head count or what.
Today, Icon held a town hall eliminating US CRA1's CTAs and comms. It's been 56 days since they announced record profits.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how you get record profits. Lay off all your workers.
Right, there you go.
more money to spread amongst the executives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There you go. Show's over, guys. That is the answer.
Yep. Mic drop. See you later.
Sponsors here.
I kind of agree with Dan. It's still booming a lot. I get like study leads, like very good study leads, and
Monica's in LA, competitive market, and she's getting
lots
of leads every week.
Yeah.
Wait, what are you getting every week? More job offers, more work, or less?
Studies.
Oh, you're getting more studies. Okay.
Yeah.
That's another site owner that is doing well. I mean, like, and this maybe is continuation of our live earlier, but Robert has a good point. I mean, these CROs do what, 800 trials a year. So if they lose
No,
half
no,
of their
no,
work
no, Dan, not 800 a year, 800 simultaneously at any
at a
given
time.
moment,
Okay.
right?
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I think, and again, I need to give a big shout out to one of my colleagues, mentors, who's an industry veteran, Gus Poveda. You know, like him and I were talking about this, and, you know, I don't want to make like this is my theory. It was a preface from actually our last Guru Nation After Dark episode that he watched in. And what he was essentially saying, he's like, look, sites don't feel what the real state of the industry really currently is. And here's why, right? So like the Yuma clinical trials, Monica's site, Chris's site, you know, all the other sites probably Darshan works with, some good, some bad, some in different situations. But I think what the point here is that, you know, when sites are used to running 10, 20, 30 simultaneous studies, I mean, I was a CRA a long time ago. I remember a site in Medford, Oregon, who had 50 trials going at any given moment, like literally. So when these types of sites, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 50, are running these studies simultaneously, they think the economy of the clinical industry trials is fine. Like the state is great. There's no problems here, right? And why do people say that it's down or it's not booming? Why am I saying that? And so the reason is that, you know, the reality is large CROs routinely run, you know, 600, 700, 800 studies simultaneously. So now picture this: in today's market, those same CROs who were doing 800 studies simultaneously are now doing 300, maybe 400, half the amount of work, right? So the Yuma clinical trials of the world, the, you know, Judy's site of the world, the Monica sites of the world, the Darshan's sites that he represents of the world that are doing well, constantly getting study leads, you know, they don't feel a change because they're still getting lots of study. But guys, trust me when I tell you, CRO folks are hurting. They are hurting. Similar for large pharma, biotech, you know, they're scaling back. Just look at all the large pharma layoffs. Fierce Biotech released today an updated layoff tracker. Like today, they just updated it today. I shared that article with you, Dan, and I'll finish by saying, you know, people who don't feel it don't necessarily believe it or see it. But that doesn't mean that the clinical industry trial is healthy right now. It's absolutely not. And quite honestly, we haven't even scratched the surface of all these insanely elevated salaries that we alluded to in a previous pod, and the shift right now that's happening in roles. You know, field CRAs eventually becoming less common to accommodate more in-house roles. You know, and just the paradigm shift in how CROs are conducting their business to maintain profits for their shareholders. So again, if you're at a sponsor CRO pharma and you have put your portfolios and certain assets on hold until Q4 of 2025, you know, yes, the sites are not going to feel that, but in terms of opportunities to grow your own career when you're not at the site, I mean, it's a struggle, guys. I mean, I'm sure you're very familiar and you're looking on LinkedIn and you see all these people that are open to work, CEOs who are starting consultancies, COOs who are starting consultancies. There are so many people that are going and branching off and trying to carve out a piece of the pie until the next opportunity comes. And, you know, I had a talk with Darshan not too long ago, and I completely agree with his assessment. I think it's going to be 6 months minimum until things kind of turn around and where we see everything harmonize again, where we can all sit on this same pod in this same panel and say, yes, the state of the industry, the state of the industry for clinical trials is healthy and booming. I'll stop there.
I'll add to that. Sorry, Monica, ladies first.
Thank you. With that being said, do you think in some point that's going to affect the sites?
So,
well, you know, not to interrupt you, Darshan, I want to go to Dan's point real quickly. I think, Monica, in certain demographic areas, like I'll just go Miami for a minute, Southern Florida. Like, yes, I mean, Justin and I spoke to a site who was seeking our services, they haven't had a study in 2 years, and they're 45 minutes west of Orlando. Like they can't get, they for the life of them cannot get a study. So I think in certain, well, I already facilitated that. Can't make
we'll
them
get him
call
a
you,
study in a
but
week.
yeah.
I think maybe also the therapeutic areas, right? Because some therapeutic areas are
Sure.
getting more dry than others.
Yeah.
So
I want to ask you something, Robert. So, I mean, obviously the trickle down to the sites, but where it's coming from, like the root, right, with sponsors or biotechs, etc., is that coming because of like a funding issue? Is there
Absolutely.
okay?
Precisely. I mean, it's the capital markets, it's the VC PE money. They're gobbling up sites right now. They're not looking to invest in a risky asset that could fail.
Yeah.
I mean, but I want to. Go ahead.
So my other question is, you were just talking about consulting, because I do think that there's been a huge boom, and or maybe not to say that maybe dramatic, but there's been a bit that I've seen coming around. I've seen those that obviously have a very heavy set of background, right? Such as, you, Dan, Chris, and a few others out there. And then you have others that kind of are within spectrum of the actual industry, but not so much within the site. So would you say that if that is a situation that's currently happening where we're going from the top down, right? Would you say that if you have newer consultants that are coming in, that are trying to assist sites that don't necessarily have that one-on-one direct understanding thoroughly through the whole process, that potentially that could affect the sites as well, the ones that are coming in and saying, hey, well, maybe they charge less, but they have some exposure? I mean, would there be some sort of, I guess you say, like a tip you would give to sites that are watching right now that are considering getting consulting and they're looking more for the easier route as opposed to being willing to invest in themselves a little bit more for those that do have the experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Actually, I don't think it's just for sites. I think it's for everybody, because we're seeing it at sponsor level. We're seeing it at CRO, niche CROs, small CROs. I mean, you see adverts on LinkedIn all the time, 10-hour contract per week. We need a temporary senior director of operations. We need a 20-hour a month head of clinical operations. So I think, to answer your question, it's at every level in our industry where I think, people are maybe hesitant to want to provide a full-time job for the sake of, we don't know if we have the infrastructure and funding to support these people, right? Mm-hmm. Benefits, insurance, 401k, if that's your thing, manicures, Dan does, things like that. So you got to have, you got to have the money coming in to be able to support those types of roles. And so if you don't, and you're a little bit gun shy and you're not 100% sure what your pipeline looks like and what the future beholds, yeah, I mean, people are looking to supplement those roles with, part-time contracts, whether they're consultancies, whether they're, perms, I mean, there's a million ways to do it. Darshan can speak to probably that way better than I can. But yeah.
So I actually was writing down like a bunch of different things that are in response to this question itself. So I think there are a few different things that are happening. Mm-hmm. I think, first of all, there is some level of reconsolidation that's happening at the sponsor CRO level. And what I mean by that is we've been talking for the last God knows how long about virtual monitoring. I think there's a certain level of that conversation happening as we speak. We're going, do I really need all these people going to all of these sites? So CROs are going, well, if I'm doing centralized monitoring, for example, well, do I really need 50 people, or can I do it with 30? Because you can start monitoring trends and then from a risk-based perspective, evaluate who needs to go out and when. Not happening as much as you'd think. I think those elements you were talking about are definitely there. But there is a certain amount of reconsolidation happening. I think to the point that Monica's raising, I think there is an element of a delay that's going to hit. So I do a lot of work in M&A transactions, for example, and there is, as Dan pointed out, as Robert pointed out, there is this interest in clinical research sites right now. So either you want to be in for the next 6 months, get out, and make your money, because there are a bunch of sites right now that can get sold and make a bunch of money, or invest for the long-term future. And I'd say that's another 1.5 to 2 years. And the middle is going to suck. But the advantage is the people who survive that are probably going to be stronger, are probably going to have better processes, and are going to get higher valuations when the time comes. So you need to decide which one you want to be. I think there's another element of, I think, again, Dan pointed this out, the disease states are changing. So there are a bunch of sites who are like, oh, you know what? We were doing a bunch of vaccine trials. There's still some of that leftover work coming through, but the vaccine trials are starting to dry up. So what's going to happen? Because again, some of the PE companies I talk to are going, yeah, we're not counting vaccine studies and evaluating a multiple anymore. So what is that going to look like? And then, quite honestly, I think, Robert, you were mentioning this a few seconds ago. You were talking about some side. No, actually, Dan, I think this was you again. Or right outside Orlando. Oh, actually, that's you, Robert. Right outside Orlando, someone can't find studies. It might very well be a study, a site issue. More often than not, I also find that sometimes it's a doctor who is really good at clinical practice, doesn't know how to market. And people think that just because you're smart at all things. And my experience is some of the worst business people I know are lawyers. Some of the worst business people I know are doctors. It doesn't mean you're a brilliant person. You could still be absolutely brilliant, but suck at other things, and that's okay. You're not supposed to be brilliant at everything, unless you're Tony Stark.
Darshan, I think this topic is also one of your expertise. If I'm not wrong, I'm putting you in the spot.
Please go ahead.
Also, artificial intelligence is affecting, because I have some studies that involve that and cut the time for the study. And like you were saying, the virtual monitoring,
studies,
I have seen it more, because I actually got, for the first time ever, 2 studies that are providing the source documents electronic.
Yeah.
Provided all the documents for the regulatory, also electronic versions, and are doing everything electronic. And in addition to that, some of the visits, the site get to choose if they want to do it face-to-face or remote. So 2 studies on a row, and I was just like, interesting. I actually like it because it's more convenient for us too, right? But yeah.
Several responses to that. So first of all, when you throw out AI, I think it's my methodology that I've come up with, but the concept you have to approach AI from is a few different levels. So number one, you need to look at the technology level concerns. Then you need to look at the pharma specific concerns, and then you need to look at the application specific concerns. Let's start with the absolute basics of just the technology level concerns. Let's talk about generative AI, because that's where a lot of the stuff that your chat GPTs and your Claudes and stuff are coming from. These things are being trained on technology, on copyrighted materials. New York Times is suing technology companies, going, you trained your systems on our copyrighted data. It's going on right now in court. So these tech companies are already fighting New York Times, who owns the copyrighted data. You know who has deeper pockets than technology companies? Pharma companies. So the moment these companies start using these tools, they have a target painted on their back. So I think that's the number one thing you need to start thinking about. The second question is, when you're doing, say, protocol design, just for argument's sake, right? Let's say you're using these studies these AIs to generate protocols for you. Where are you getting the protocols from? So a lot of these companies are saying, oh, no, we will generate the protocol for you. Well, you have to train that protocol on something, that AI on something. Where are you getting those protocols from? Oh, we got it from some places that gave us, say, 5 of them. Fine, you got them from 5. What about the 50 others that you actually needed to train on those 5? And what no one wants to admit is that you're going to have copyright issues from that front itself. So that's just the training part of it. What about the output? So let's say it throws out a protocol. Who owns that protocol? Because the fact is that the U.S. Copyright Office is coming out and saying, you know what? There are issues with whether a human being can own something generated by AI. And that's just some of the issues. There's the black box problem. There's the bias problems. I'm literally writing a book on like the 50 problems. And I'm not exaggerating, like 50 problems with AI at the technology, the pharma, and the application specific level.
Can't wait to read that one.
Yeah, I can't wait. I actually recently had a meeting with a company that they help sites to find the patients and all of that with the AI.
Yeah.
And they train the AI and everything. And I was obviously one of the first things that you ask is the HIPAA and all of that. And they have that implemented. But I wonder to which is the extent, right? First. And then the other
Sean's
thing
laughing because this
Yeah,
is
I
like invoices for him. And it's like send invoice.
and then the other thing is if we put the let's say the AI to create the protocol, to which extent is that information is completely private, right? Or completely protected. So I think obviously all of that comes to the table, because especially with so much people or so many people, especially after the pandemic, a lot of hackers became even much better,
Hacking
more
the treasury.
smart. Exactly. So
So
with AI is obviously
So several issues. Let's address so many of these issues at the same time. So,
Monica, you'll be getting an invoice.
We're getting into serious shit. Let's talk about serious shit here.
I think we're all going to get an invoice.
I see the passion. That's why I said that topic.
I'll send that to the sponsor.
I'll let Monica ask the questions. I'm not asking anything.
So let's start with the basics. Does HIPAA apply to clinical research? If you do it right, and Dan, this is the topic that you and I are going to talk about next week. If you do it right, HIPAA does not apply to clinical research, but you have to do it right.
So real quick, sorry, I got a question right there. Why am I seeing more and more? They're asking for IRBs are asking, do you want a HIPAA waiver?
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, why? Why then?
You ain't doing it right.
I would look at exactly the language, and I would go, do I need to sign a HIPAA waiver? I'd want to look at the language about what they're waiving, because one of the things I don't want is a scenario where I'm saying HIPAA applies to me and I'm saying I get a waiver, as opposed to HIPAA doesn't apply to me and I'm agreeing that it doesn't apply to me. So to me, HIPAA waivers can come in different flavors. Which flavor are you asking me to sign? And we've got to be careful about that, because what we don't know, and again, Dan, this is after dark, so it doesn't count. We're going to still have a discussion about this next week.
I'm texting my coordinator to uncheck the HIPAA waiver box. I really am. Continue on.
Yeah, I tell all of our clients not to check the HIPAA waiver boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I actually.
But thank you, Darshan.
Not legal advice, not clinical advice. I want to be very clear about this.
Yeah. Well, Chris, what did you say? Check it or uncheck it?
Don't check it.
I am not answering this question.
Don't check it.
Okay.
But what I would go out.
I'm sorry, Darshan. Just real quick. I don't understand why this is such a reoccurring thing now. I hadn't ever seen this on an IRB submission form.
I want to look at the language. I'm not signing jack shit. Sorry. I'm not signing jack shit without knowing what the language specifically says. And the reason I care about, and this is going back to the issue I want to talk to Dan about, because I got pulled into it because I'm helping a client, and we got into this discussion that I spoke to like 4 other lawyers and negotiators in the last like 48 hours, because I was like, I haven't discussed this before. Are you guys discussing this? And they all went, no, we're not. And holy shit, why are none of us discussing this? Because the big issue is technically speaking, if you sign a HIPAA waiver, are you saying that you're practicing medicine? And if you are saying you're practicing medicine, at that point, are you engaged in the unauthorized practice of medicine? And in about 60% of states, a non-physician cannot practice medicine, in which case you have just spoiled your entire clinical trial site because you are now engaged in the unauthorized practice of medicine. And you can't sell that thing. So you've got to structure your business properly. And that's critical. So the HIPAA waiver may have unintended consequences, and you need to be really freaking careful about this. No one has any idea what I just said, except Dr. Goldman, who's shaking his head going, yep.
I just know we got to check a box. Uncheck a box.
Uncheck. Stay on that side.
We're good. We're good.
Okay, no. The point being, be careful about what you sign and unsign. So whether or not you check a box, it's not as simple as that. Know what box you're checking. What is it saying?
Yeah, I got to go back.
It might very well be that, but I don't know without looking at the box.
Yeah, I got to go back and look. Justin, Judy, welcome, Judy, Sun Valley Research Center.
JD.
And Justin, what do you guys think about all this state of the market, sites, CRO work, gigs? What's going on your side of the world?
What's a HIPAA?
I feel the same.
Smaller.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, everything's good at my side. We're busy, so I joined when you guys were talking
Three
about.
sites busy. All
No,
three.
I mean, we're busy in the psych CNS. Now, I have tried to reach out for other therapeutic conditions. That's been a challenge. But I mean, psych CNS, I'm seeing a lot of studies. But I have seen this shift. I think Robert was talking about with the CRO sponsors. What Monica mentioned about remote visits. I have seen less monitors available. Delays in studies. Major delays in startup of studies, though, for sure. Studies that should have started months ago. Still, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Did you get your startup fee though?
No, because they haven't officially finalized everything. So that's why I'm saying what the delay is actually finalizing the agreement. I don't know. This is longer than it's usually been for some of the studies we're working on.
Some of the big ones take forever. One that starts with an S and ends with an I. I won't say anything else.
And what is the one word between those two?
I actually got 2 monitors asking me if we were seeing any slowdown, and I say no, but I think they have, because one of them mentioned that they actually couldn't the hours for them to go and visit the site. So,
wow. So on the CRO and sponsor side, it's kind of real, and on the site side, it's like a wonderland.
So I have a slightly different take on the job market aspect of things. I think that yes, the funding for biotech is down, but it's not the first time it's been down, right? It happened in 2008, 2012, I think 2017. So I mean, it comes and goes. There was a peak because of COVID. People were trying to cash out on that, and then now that that's over, it's like they're pulling out. So I definitely think it's going to come back. I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball that Darshan has.
Well, I'm seeing the deals starting up already. I'm seeing the deals right now.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that there's that aspect of it, but I think that from the CRO and sponsor side of things, you're now competing against a larger market because you have people that sponsors historically hired everybody to be in the office. So their net they only cast out far enough to where whoever could drive to the office, or if you moved, then you could drive to the office. Everybody got a little taste of that remote work from home during COVID. And then afterwards, everybody's like, oh, we got to come back to the office. So it's a compromise now. It's like 3 days a week in a lot of sponsors. So 2 days at home, 3 days in the office. So all these remote, is there a shortage of remote jobs? I don't know. I think there's just more people applying to them because people that historically have always been within driving distance of an office and going into the office is now saying, I want that remote job. So they're applying for those remote jobs on top of everybody who's been remote for their entire career. So the remote jobs aren't drying up. I think there's just more competition.
I don't know. I think I've honestly, what I've seen is that actual remote work from home 100% has gone down substantially, at least on the CRA end. But I think that the tactic and how they market the jobs that are open, they use the word remote, but when you read the context, it's you work remote, but you're traveling, right? And so
Right.
I've seen a change in that a lot. Since I work with some clients outside of my usual 9 to 5 at the biotech, and I've seen that a lot where a lot of clients are like, well, I'm trying to find remote, but they're all actual travel. So yeah, you need to read the context, because and it wasn't like that before. Honestly, I never, when I was initially applying at the very beginning for a CRA role at a CRO, that was not the case. They would say just regular CRA, and then they would talk about at the bottom work from home and travel. But now it's remote CRA.
So
80% travel.
So what I would say is 3 different things.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, the word remote is changing.
Mm-hmm.
So remote versus work from home are becoming 2 different terms. So some people are saying you can work from home 3 days a week, but you need to show up in the office 2 days a week. And and going back to the point that Justin was raising a few minutes ago, it goes back to exactly that. You suddenly the geography doesn't become that wide. If you have to still show up to work twice a week, you can't be in California while your job is in New York. So that's number one. There's also the senior level people versus the junior level people. And what I mean by that is, if you are a senior level person, you can write your ticket even today. And there just are fewer of you. Having said that, there are fewer of you, but you charge a lot of you cost a lot of money, so you're the first to get fired. So there are more of you right now because a lot of you got fired right now. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other element. I used to work as general counsel, chief compliance officer, chief information security officer for this company. And we had a ton of remote people who used to work for us. And the big problem we faced, and we realized this after the fact, and Dan, you and I discussed this earlier today, but it goes back to this idea that if your employees are in certain states, you now need to register in those states to do business. And what people don't realize is, yes, it's more convenient for me to be sitting in Ohio making a New York wage. But the fact is that means that my New York company needs to now register in Ohio, pay taxes in Ohio, and follow the employment laws in Ohio. And you're just going, I don't want to do all that. Like, just come to New York and do the job. I don't want to deal with 50 states. Mm-hmm. And it's gone from being a buyer's environment, from being a job seeker's environment, to becoming a company environment. Mm-hmm. And that's going to change what you do. So, Monica, you have something you want to say?
No, I was going to ask if that's also, I mean, obviously that can be the cause of many job people getting off jobs and things like that too, right? So, but we don't know the statistic of what is caused because of the economy or what is caused because of this, right?
Yeah.
Everything at the same time. So,
right. I think that's why. Oh, sorry, I'm going to
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you're still talking. Go ahead.
No, I was reading that that happened in California, that a lot of people move out to other states, keeping their jobs here because they were remote. But then the companies say all of a sudden, we need you in the office. So they either have to choose to keep living where they are or move back to California. And I was reading about it, and it was interesting because obviously everybody, because of the taxes and everything in California, that is not convenient, but then at the same time the wages are higher. So if you move to another state that is cheaper, you're gonna make less money and pay less, but then I mean, it's at the end of the day it's the same. Mm-hmm. Kind of. So yeah.
So I actually don't talk too much about where I work and all of that. I don't like to disclose those things, but I will say that I've actually experienced that. I was remote. I've been remote, honestly, for the past 10 years, I think 3 or 4 years prior to COVID. just recently I was like, okay, well, we're going to need you to come in, and it's another state, come in once a month for at least 3 to 4 days, which for me, I'm fine with that. I have been working from home. I mean, I prefer not to, but it's in a really great area, so it works out for me. But I definitely, when I talk to people, I say, if you have a job, if you're already in the industry and you don't like what you're doing or you don't like the situation scenario, I agree with you, Josh, 100%. It's definitely not. It's a company's playing ground right now, not so much the actual person looking for the job, right? So you need to be flexible and nimble, even if you don't like it, right? I think during the whole COVID time frame, a lot of us, I think, got very cushy, right, with pay and all that stuff. I'm going to ask for this, I'm going to ask for that, and I even say that I was at some point like that. But being able to adapt and be aware, and know where your space is during that time frame is really important, because if not, you can really find yourself on the other side of the aisle.
So we got 50 people on LinkedIn, 39 on X. I don't know how many on Facebook right now, but quick shout outs to the people watching, or at least commenting. Jim Choi, good intro. He loved that song. LinkedIn user, identify yourself, stranger. More layoffs coming, do you think? This is really good. Part-time is good for consultants because we all know things happen, and they can happen abruptly. If you're working 4 to 5 contracts and to end, you still have work. I'm on the same mentality as Helen. Like, this is, what do you guys think about this as contractors? I think we've all done contract work here. I think all of us. I love it. I think this is the strategy, the solution. Now, it's not for everyone. You have to have some experience, but no one says how much experience you need. It's a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put something else.
So different than what you see at a CRO. So, like, a CTM is assigned to 3 studies. They're essentially part-time. They're just getting a paycheck from one provider, as opposed to 3 different things. So, like, the workload is probably less if you're a consultant than you are a CTM assigned to 3 different studies, or a project manager assigned to 2 or 3 different studies.
Very interesting. Yeah.
True. I'm gonna put something else on the table on top of everything. Diversity, our favorite topic. How is that gonna affect? How is that gonna affect now the studies?
You know my thoughts on this.
Everything.
All right, we started Latinos in clinical research.
You don't like diversity, Dan?
Darshan, what kind of attorney are you, man? Like, you're
what have you got against diversity?
Me?
That's so good.
Darshan, listen. We started Latinos in clinical research. We were inspired by Daniel from Black Women in Clinical Research. Shout out to them. Look, we've all said, I think, I don't want to speak for Monica, Judy, Ashley, or Chris, but we've always said we felt like the industry was just saying it because it sounds good, but they weren't actually doing anything. And now, like, when markets shift, that's where rubber meets the road. Like, let's see what happens. But that's been my thoughts on this the whole time. It's just virtue signaling.
Virtue signaling, but I won't say they weren't doing anything. I will say that it was a tunnel vision focus on one specific area of diversity. And that, again, perfectly fine. One step forward is a step forward. I'll take it, or 2 steps forward. That's great, but that's not enough. And again, it's like you said, virtue signaling. It's how do they say the word? Coining or whatever. Yeah, that's, and then being on the back end of Latinos in clinical research, where we're actually having these conversations with these organizations and companies or CROs, etc., vendors, it's always about how can we work with you, and how can we spread the name for you, but there's never the conversation of how can we support you to move you forward. And we were always very straightforward. Okay, well, the way we do this is we educate our community and funds so that we can move forward and get further grasp of the community outside of just the usual we're doing. And immediately the minute you say that, it's like, oh, okay, and then we don't hear from anybody for a while. And that's just been, the kind of ring around the rosy that we've had in it's quite, how do you say, you can put like a cloud over that, and realizing how much, the industry, it is geared towards the marketing aspect really, and not so much the actual cause, at least from what I've seen.
What are your thoughts, Darshan and Justin and Robert?
Well, first of all, in terms of diversity, I wrote an article for DEI that got published not that long ago.
Yeah, let me put it up.
So
the one you're sharing, the evolution.
Yeah, that's the one I'm sharing. So for those people who are interested in that, basically went down the entire history of diversity that the FDA's put out, and it's not much. They're getting started, and I'm excited for what they're doing. But I think that FDA needs to do more. They're already investing into it. Here's the problem you're facing. I'm dealing with this both at a clinical level and at clinical research level and at a corporate level. And those are two different beasts right now. Mm-hmm. So you've got a bunch of different states coming out. I think today's announcement was University of either South Carolina or North Carolina came out and said that we aren't going to have diversity be a part of our hiring considerations. Texas, I believe, has already said that before. Florida, I believe, has said that as well. I could be wrong about my states, but I know Florida has. Mm-hmm. I know North Carolina. I think it's either North Carolina or South Carolina has just come out. Point being, states are saying we don't want to consider it. You've got companies that are questioning. Well, universities are being told that you can't consider it in the same way anymore. So the question then becomes, is diversity a passing fad? Except you're seeing large Fortune 500 companies come out and coming out and they're saying that we want to invest into diversity. And so number one, that's still happening. FDA is doubling down. The question we face is what happens in 2025 if there's a new government. Will those policies continue, or will that change?
But aren't you describing two different things, Darshan?
Why so, Chris?
Well, hiring somebody's entirely different than the FDA mandating.
I agree.
You need racial diversity so that everybody's represented for the drugs. That's entirely different than saying we're going to hire via meritocracy.
Chris, absolutely. But the fact is that the challenges that are coming are not necessarily drawing those distinctions at this point, right? People are taking broad swaths at it. I agree with you 100%. They're completely different issues. You want your patient population to be representative, but diversity shows up in different ways. Dan and I were having this conversation earlier today. If you're going to have diverse patients, you need to have diverse people to talk to those patients as well. You can't just have Spanish-speaking patients with no one to speak to them in Spanish.
Certainly. And Dan and I talked about this for, 10 years. Long before DEI was a thing, right?
Mm-hmm. And Judy, that's how you get to the patient populations. Judy's been doing this in her community.
That's what I was going to say. Regardless of the policies, regardless if you are not working with these diverse sites located in these diverse communities that are doing this work, and you're not investing or providing them with the resources, you're not going to get these diverse patients in these clinical trials. And a lot of sponsors, CROs, say they're there to support you as a site. And then when you go and submit a recruitment plan and you're doing all these things in your community, the person that is supposed to approve it is a person that should not be in that position to approve these plans, because they have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to community outreach, diversity. Like, that's what we need to change. Regardless of these policies, we need to get these people who are open to these ideas, to this, what these sites are doing, to bring in these patients, because hiring a central recruitment campaign is not going to do it. Sorry, that's not working in these diversity. It's not working
unless it's patient ACE.
So not even patient ACE. So I mean, yes, it worked for 1 out of 3 conditions. So that's what I'm saying. So it just depends.
Rodnick, are you watching?
It helps supplement those leads, but it's not 100% going to get you.
Judy, the difference though is that the FDA is now requiring that. And sort of enforcing that.
At the sponsor CRO level, they're not still doing
not
this
yet,
day.
But it's happening soon. Give it another year or so.
I mean, it should have been happening like 5 years ago.
The need for diversity existed, but the point you were making was we're not seeing the impact because there's no incentive. And the point is now there's an incentive because your drugs may not get the same scrutiny without
and if that's the case, then that's going to be the mandation, what's going to be mandated moving forward. And we've had a scenario or been the scenario where that has not been the actual case, where that role's been occupied by those kinds of individuals. Where are these individuals going to come from that actually have this experience and that meet those backgrounds? And are we going to have enough to go around that encompasses the areas that we need to? I feel like we're going to hit some barriers and issues there. And this is why I feel very, passionate, not just about Latinos clinical research, but all the other diversity organizations out there, because this is where I feel the connection with outside community, outside of just the usual recruitment and their, bags of employees that they have on, I guess, retainer, however you want to put it, is really going to have to start getting implemented, because there's just not, I don't feel like there's going to be good cohesion while we go through that process or how we implement all of that.
Right. Yeah. And
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So when we're talking about diversity, I know we kind of mentioned both the hiring, but also like the patients in the trial. Where do we see global clinical trials in this realm? Because if you're talking about true diversity, you've got to go global. Mm-hmm. And if we're just talking about diversity in the United States, then that's a totally different question. That's a totally different discussion point. And yeah, if we're only doing clinical trials in the United States, we need to do trials on the population that is diverse of that. But again, that's where global trials come into place. If we're doing global trials in China, Latin America, Africa,
or how about you talking about Latin America, Europe, Spain?
I'm going to disagree with you.
Sorry, you're going to, or you're not going to?
I am going to disagree with you.
Okay.
So for multiple reasons. Because the lawyer never disagrees. We're a very agreeable bunch.
I think I know where you're going to go.
I didn't make a statement. I asked a question.
Actually,
how are you going to disagree with my question, Darshan?
Let me frame the question that you meant to ask. How about this, Justin? Let me tell you what you did.
Fair enough.
I think I have a feeling where are you going to go, Darshan?
Let's find out if I'm right, Monica. So, Justin, the question I think you're asking is, if you want more diversity, should that diversity not just come from the U.S., but from global studies in China, in Africa, in Latin America? And here's the big difference. In the end, when you are a sponsor, there are three major areas you're trying to get approval in. You're trying to get that approval in the U.S., in Europe, and in Japan, the ICH countries. And the reason you're doing that is because that's where the majority of reimbursement comes from. That's not to say that the other countries aren't important, but it's to say that's where the majority of money is going to come from. So it's just your regulatory planning strategies. When you're developing your TPP, target product profile, you are making those conscious decisions. That's where you're filing your patents. You're making sure you're covered, blah, blah, blah. The next question becomes, so you make sure that your patient population is reflected in this planning stage. So if you're doing studies in the US, you're doing them with the perspective that your patient population that the FDA wants is represented in the US. Now you might go, well, we have Asian subjects in the US. Why can't we just use Chinese subjects to reflect that diversity? And my position to that would be, Chinese subjects people from China have a different cuisine, have a different set of meds, a different way they take meds than the people in the US. So for example, in Japan, as I'm sure you guys know, people prefer to take one pill 3 times a day, as opposed to one pill once a day in the US. Alternatively, in India, and I'm making broad sweeping generalizations here, in India, people like injections versus pills because injections are thought of to be more potent and more efficacious. These aren't necessarily logical, but that's just how the thought process works. So those considerations may impact how diversity gets played out. So in the US, the FDA may say, we want to see more patient populations, more subjects, and sponsors would plan for those studies for the US population. Now, to the extent that global diversity comes into play, for example, if you're doing some studies in Southeast Asia, they will actually ask for a pilot group, 40, 50 patients. And that will become the transition to say you can get the drug approved in those countries. So diversity will play itself in a very different role in a global population. I don't think a clear "we want diversity, we'll go global" is going to be as simple as that. Is that responsive to the question you didn't ask?
I don't think. But I never. Yeah, but I didn't ask a question that implied that the way to go to the true diversity is to go global. But but you answered the question that I didn't ask brilliantly, and in the process, you described a very diverse patient population, I might add. So well played. But yeah, no, I think that it's, you have, it depends on what you're trying to market the drug, but there's ways to increase the diversity, and one of those ways is, I feel, going global. And even though you may be limited, but I've done studies all over. I've done studies in Latin America, South America, South Africa, Africa, India, China, Australia, Europe. So, I mean, I've been on massive studies with 18,000 patients globally. So, it happens.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
it's a way to increase the diversity. But I know that there are some sponsors that only do clinical trials in the United States. They do not do anything in Europe. Those are the ones that we need to be targeting for more diverse patient populations, that is diverse and reflective of, I think, the United States. I mean, is that not?
So, Justin, I think I'm going to use the Chris Sauber method of disagreeing with you. You're right for a very different reason. And what I mean by that is you have participated in those 18,000, 50,000 patient studies at a global level, but they weren't 18,000, 50,000 people studies because of diversity. They were 18,000, 15,000 person studies being done globally because sponsors knew, I'm never going to get those 15,000, 18,000 people in the US fast enough. I'm going to do that in China. It's going to take forever to freaking get that launch going. But once it does, the freaking graph just goes vertical.
Yeah, it was an event-driven study, so they had to have a heart attack. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask something. I want to ask something to both of you, since you're talking, and this is obviously out of forgive my ignorance. So with when it comes to regulations and the quality of the data, is that the data that is being collected in Asia or in the other countries is valuable here? They can bring that data here and use it, even if the regulations are completely different?
So
the trick is... okay, no. I'm going to respond, and then Darshan's going to correct me, because I'll probably get it wrong. All right. So my understanding is that as long as you're following the FDA and ICH guidelines on data collection and handling, then it's allowed. But I think it would be hard to get a drug approved in the United States that was solely in one country with questionable data practices. Darshan.
Damn it, Justin, you got all of it right. I was hoping you'd miss that last part. I was hoping you would forget the last part. So generally speaking, Justin said exactly the right things, which is, and just to be clear, not legal advice. But moving on, you're right in that as long as the studies are being done anywhere in the world, as long as they represent the study plan and the FDA is okayed the study plan, the FDA is relatively agnostic about where the studies are done. If you have GCP issues, you have GCP issues. It doesn't matter where you have those GCP issues. Having said that, to the point that Justin is making, I believe there was one study that was done only in China, if I remember correctly. And the FDA did not accept that. I can't even remember when this was. This is going back several years. And I remember that becoming an issue. Speaking of China, by the way, have you guys been hearing about the Biodefense Act?
No.
Yeah, Wuxi.
Wuxi, there you go. Wuxi, you and I talked about this, right?
Yeah.
That was last week.
quick,
China's
Cliff notes.
over. China's over.
Cliff notes. They're basically saying that Wuxi and like 2 other companies, if you do business with them, the U.S. government will not pay for any work you do with them in terms of research and the like, and approval and the like. Wow. Which means that everyone suddenly is just going, I am not touching Wuxi. Yeah. And it's become a major issue. It's part of the U.S. versus China thing. And just to be clear, because I'd like to go to China someday, because I think it's a great country, I do want to say that it's not commenting on Wuxi or the like, but the argument is that they are taking the data and sharing it with the Chinese government. But
allegedly,
thank you for adding that word in there.
CCP, I mean, you don't know.
If that's the case, that the companies can do the studies overseas, and if the economy becomes so difficult and it's cheaper to do it overseas, maybe that's what they're gonna do, and then the sites here are just don't gonna have those businesses anymore.
But they've been doing that for the last 10 years. We've actually gone through multiple cycles already. So I don't think it's one or the other. It'll be both.
So it has to include data from United States.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't always make sense to include data from the United States, at the very least, because they want. In the end, it's really hard to argue. And actually, I'll let Robert address this because he has personal experience with this. But it's really hard to go, hey, I did this study in China. Would you prescribe for your patients in, I don't know, Oklahoma based on the Chinese data?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm under. So for me, I'm under the impression of, these. Whatever, I'm not, saying anything specific towards any type of a country, but in my experience, the data that's useful, I think we need to put into 2 buckets. Number one is safety data to meet your safety database expectations for, let's say you have an NME, a new molecular entity that you're trying to get across the finish line, versus efficacy data. I don't believe that, like, in certain countries, China being one of them, with that the FDA is going to rely on efficacy data. Safety data, yes, you can use the safety data in terms of the patients have been exposed to their drug to meet your safety database requirements that were established in the end of phase 2 meeting. But in terms of efficacy data, I think sponsors need to be really careful on where that data comes from. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow, this webinar has been so enlightening. Really, I've been asking all the questions I've been having always.
The research is booming at the site level, and it will continue to boom at the site level, is what I'm hearing. I mean,
and look at this article that Huma just put in
Huma,
the chat
I
there.
wish I could click it, but somebody out there can click it.
Here, I'll click it for you.
You can
FDA declines approval of the Hutch meds. Yeah.
So hold on, I'm sharing.
This is a big statement, Robert. Also, Justin, it's deeper than that. There are certain medical indications more prevalent in American persons of African descent versus African Black Americans. Yeah, exactly right. That's like when just look around your neighborhoods and see what kind of fast food stores and liquor stores are in certain neighborhoods, and look at what the disease prevalence is in those neighborhoods.
I'll actually take you one better, and I'm sort of adding on to what Robert said not that long ago. This idea of using data for safety, not efficacy. It's one of the reasons why a lot of sponsors are not fans of doing research where it's basically just for humanitarian purposes, because the FDA says we won't use that data for efficacy reasons, but if you find a problem, we're going to use that data. So it's all downside for those sponsors, which is why they're like, well, yes, we help a person and that's great, but it might cause the entire program to go down. So it's pretty risky for those sponsors.
Risky, and at the end of the day, it's in the case of biotechs, there's investors they've got to please, and in the case of pharma, there's shareholders. So
yeah, but the flip side of that is the PR nightmare, right? Yeah, denying a patient medication is not that great either.
Well, for sure. So this is the article Huma shared. If you can move it or see what it's about. Yeah, so they declined 2 cancer studies.
Yeah.
Based on Chinese data.
Tested mainly in China, declined to approve.
Yeah.
And this was only studied in China.
Yeah. But that was 2022. I mean, 2024 is such a different environment. I don't think they're even. I know you want to go visit China one day, Darshan, but I think it's kind of over for a while, at least for a decade.
Well, I think that's exactly what it's saying, though, isn't it?
But this was like 2022 article.
Yeah, but the rules are still the same, which is don't do studies in only one country and expect the US FDA to accept it.
Right. Even before you throw in the spying on stealing your IP possibility.
Right.
This episode sponsored by China.
You know what? Here's the thing. If it was sponsored by China, I know for a fact Dan Farrar would be wearing a red shirt right now.
CCP, baby.
I don't know. He's got the red light right over his head.
Social currency for everything, man.
Well, in conclusion, the sites are gonna be booming for a while more.
I conclude the same, Monica. And but my point with diversity, the whole thing when I was talking about virtue signaling, it was not about the patients. I actually think the sponsors are trying. To Judy's point, maybe not trying hard
maybe
enough.
like 2 out of 10.
like Inato has a whole thing now. Hey, showcase your diversity. And actually, one of the things you guys are doing, Judy, I gotta publicly commend you on this. Sun Valley Research Center Instagram. You guys are doing it the right way.
Oh yeah, that's a shout out to my staff, Leslie, Dr. Sampero. This idea, Alessandra, that came together of trying to attract the younger generation, just throwing content that's not maybe research specific, but just whatever's out there on Instagram. I guess.
It's amazing. I've been liking them a lot. Everybody go follow Sun Valley Research Center on Instagram. But Inato has a place now to showcase what you're doing as a site to improve diversity. And like your post, honestly, like you can just pick your last 5 at random and put them on there. That's better than most of the sites out there, what they're doing. So those kind of things are actually helping you get more studies.
I was gonna say that I mean we have to the sites that probably gonna thrive more are the ones that are showing more work in diversity. Just because obviously the FDA is gonna be putting more pressure on the sponsors on that end, and at the end of the day, the ones that recruit and bring that diversity are gonna be the sites. So
and that's diversity as far as study participants. The FDA is making it real. But of the virtue signaling, as far as let's hire, and I'm not talking about sites because it makes sense. It makes sense to have African American coordinators if you want to enroll African American patients. There's better rapport. They've done studies on this for Hispanics, even more so with the language barrier. But what at the CRO and sponsor level, the argument is, and no one wants to discuss this, but some people in the comments were saying, no, you're right. It's all virtue signaling, and at this point, when you got to tighten up the budget, the purse strings, does DEI matter anymore? Like from your hiring practices as a sponsor or CRO? I don't know. Let's let the market decide and let the people. At this point, all we have is anecdotes because no one's going to release a study saying, "Hey, we stopped hiring for DEI and here's the results." No one's going to do that.
Do you think that this perception that there's this DEI virtue signaling is going to negatively impact clinical trials' quest to get more diversity in their patient populations?
No, because I think the heroes are sites like Judy and Monica that are doing it on the grassroots level. The patients don't care what Quintiles is doing or whatever they're called now.
They don't even know.
They don't even know that that's a thing. They look at the site, what they're doing. That's their touch point is like their Facebook posts, their Instagram, maybe their YouTube channel. That's what they see.
Yeah,
I do want to add. As a site, even though we talked about this virtual signaling, what I do though is I do want these sponsor CROs to do better. So I will provide feedback. I will connect to someone who's higher up. I will contact them on manager or whatever, and just discuss some of these issues we're having and like how we can work together to resolve it, the gaps that are preventing us from doing what we need to do and recruit patients, especially being in a 75% Latino community, border town into Mexico. So I do that because I'm tired of these gaps, right, of these barriers, but I want to, as an industry, like we talk, make a change. So I will do what I can to reach out to the right people at other organizations to see what I can do to hopefully fix it.
Yeah, I think
Judy,
also. Please go
sorry,
ahead.
Monica. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the things that I think it has been beneficial for our sites in general is basically that point, diversity, because in my feasibilities I always explain that we have 5 different languages in my site that we can work with, right? So that just there is a lot of diversity when it comes to the when it comes to ethnicity, right? But then in addition to that, we're surrounded by an area that is incredibly diverse, like including LGTB and all of this, right? So I think it's that little detail that people sometimes are just talking but not walking is gonna be the game changer in the future, in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the big thing you guys are seeing is the efforts that sites are making. And I think that's great. I think what you're not seeing, and I'm reading the regulations, so I know what's coming in like 6 months. I'm working with partners on some of this stuff right now. 6 months may be a little early because you're starting the pushes right now. But sites won't be chosen that don't have diverse populations.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was kind of getting a feeling of that already, or I've heard that, or I've kind of seen that.
But like, which sites don't actually have diverse like is it the AMCs?
Well,
I mean, I've never seen a site that doesn't have a diverse.
It's not that you don't have a diverse population, but that you don't enroll diverse patients.
I mean, I can say for a fact, well, when I worked in San Diego, it's been a long time, even though San Diego is so diverse, most of the patients that we recruited were 90% white people, even though we were so weak, because that's just, I don't know, if it's how much it's changed here, but yeah, and that keeps happening. So even in the larger cities.
We do our advertisement and our reach around our community to make sure that we're bringing diverse population to our site. So we have patients that speak Spanish, obviously English, patients that speak Chinese, Vietnamese, Farsi. I think that's it. So it's and Hebrew. So I mean, we have some, because my team is very, very diverse.
Arabic.
So and we have.
I'm willing to work part-time for Hindi, just so you know. And Urdu. I did learn on this topic that we should be doing part-time work. So anyone who's looking for part-time,
there's people in the comments.
Oh, there you go. Right there.
Actually, Helen has a really interesting comment there. If you see that, where she goes,
from a sponsor perspective,
they
can ensure that sites have the funding to handle diverse population. This is what Judy was complaining about. Judy's one of the loudest voices on this topic. Can't consent someone in Spanish or Chinese if you have no one there who can speak medically in that language.
I think you might actually start seeing a reverse of that, which is you'll start seeing ads that are purposefully in Spanish and Chinese going, we want more people from these populations. So some might argue it is exclusionary by saying that it's more for Chinese population, Spanish-speaking populations. But I think the question becomes, in 5 years, do you see a change in demographics in your clinical research so that it's non-representative? And what does that look like at that point?
So clinical research is booming. The summary is clinical research is booming for sites, but even more so for lawyers.
I mean, overall, it needs to reflect, or if your site is located, whatever your site or consists of, that's what your research studies should reflect. and what you have access to, exactly like what the census numbers are, that's what you should be recruiting your trials, right?
Yeah.
Justin wants to.
I mean,
say
and plus United States population is gonna
Correct.
be a lot more diverse in 5
Correct.
years. So we have to reflect that in the clinical research, and people are gonna be demanding that. Not just the FDA, but the communities in general are gonna be demanding that drug is not working, or the doctors. The newest generations are more conscious about that.
So
Justin.
when we're talking about like recruiting diverse patients, there's, to me it seems like I'm looking at it in a more holistic approach, like from 100,000 feet up, where some sites, in some regions of the country will recruit more from one culture or background than another. But
Mhm.
as long as all the sites selected for the study are recruiting a patient population that is reflective of the United States population, or relatively close to it, right? I mean, I don't want to step on any biostatistician's toes, but whether or not it's reflective of the population, that's the goal, and that means that sites that can recruit from one population versus another may be more competitive depending on the overall demographics of the country, right?
Yep.
Location.
That's
Right.
facts. Like if
Mhm.
someone's in a competitive market and they want more studies, they might need to move, like drive east, like in California, drive east. In Arizona, find a spot like near the border. That's what we did. But there's places that are still underserved that are actually potentially good for research sites. They're just everyone's concentrated in the big cities, and
Mhm.
that's why some sites are having a hard time getting studies.
Yeah, especially when you hear of like in Florida. I think
Yeah.
at LSR we interviewed multiple where sites were literally like 2 streets away from each other or a street away from each other, and they were doing 1 or 2 similar studies. I remember hearing that, being like, "Wow, it's gotta be uncomfortable," you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other issue, I think you guys mentioned it, or somebody did earlier, is that these sites don't have the staff that represents the patient population they're trying to recruit. And they're still not investing in that. They're still not hiring, and they're trying to get around it somehow. And then they're complaining they can't recruit and they're not getting studies. Well, you don't have the staff to talk to the patients, to connect with them, to make them want to feel comfortable to participate. And that's still occurring.
Yeah, that's just bad business, in my opinion. I mean, like, I know that there was a point made in the comment section, but when I was a CRA, like at an evaluation visit, we'd always ask the sites, "What do you need? Any other languages other than English? Okay, what's your process? Do you have staff here that speak Spanish, that speak Farsi? Like, do you have a process for this?" Instead of just saying, "Okay, here's your consent in English," and then making them ask.
Mhm.
It's something that we always sought out when we were doing evals.
Well, we gotta thank everyone for coming on. Everybody go connect with. Well, Chris, do you have a LinkedIn, Chris?
Yes,
I
he
never
does.
know. You
Does he?
do have a
He
LinkedIn.
does.
He does, and he has not yet accepted me as friend.
I don't know.
Good
He
job,
accepted
Chris.
me, Monica. He accepted me.
No offense, Monica. I haven't been on LinkedIn in 5 years, but I do have one account.
Okay, Chris has one. You could connect with him. Justin's link is underneath.